This week, Tom Kellermann from Contrast Security is with us to discuss the latest cybercrime trends. Then Donald Fischer from Tidelift joins us to talk about the impact of the new national cybersecurity strategy on organizations building with open source. Finally, in the enterprise security news, lots of new funding, the 10 plagues of cloud security, 69 ways to F up your deploy, rolling out YubiKeys harder than you thought, ChatGPT concerning insurance companies now, understanding data governance when using ChatGPT, cybersecurity, the new high school curriculum requirement, the importance of collaboration to cybersecurity, and when tires attack. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
Attackers are only getting more proficient, so how can you proactively adapt your cybersecurity strategy? Core Security by Fortra helps you uncover and prioritize the risks that pose the biggest threat to your organization. Core Impact is a penetration testing tool that safely finds and exploits vulnerabilities using the same techniques as attackers. You can conduct advanced pen tests with ease using certified exploits and automation. Take your engagements further by pairing with our red teaming tools from Cobalt Strike and Outflank. Learn more at www.securityweekly.com/core security. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Burrito Day. This is episode 312, recorded on Thursday, April 6, 2023. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the Czar of Zero Trust, the captain of content, Katie Tytler. How are you, Katie?
I'm a little disappointed, Adrian. You did not tell me about National Burrito Day before lunch.
Well, you know, you can always have burritos for dinner.
I suppose that's true. But hey, there's nothing bad about a National Burrito Day, or even a not National Burrito Day. Just a day with a burrito is a good day.
It is. It is. They are truly the best sandwich, are they not?
I agree, but I think there are going to be a few people who are listening to this who are now shaking their fists at clouds saying a burrito is not a sandwich.
It is the best sandwich because nothing can fall out of it as long as it's made properly. Whereas
I think the trick is when they put it in tinfoil or a wrapper and you can like squeeze it all in while you're eating it.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't push all of the goodness down and splat at the bottom.
I remember teaching my kids, I was like, no, you don't take the foil completely off. You kind of peel it down as you eat it. Like, just in case it's leaking on the inside there, you want to leave that foil in place. Anyway, burritos are tasty. Have a burrito today. It's National Burrito Day. And also, we've got an announcement here. Join us at an upcoming official cybersecurity summit in a city near you. In fact, there is one in Nashville near me. This series of one-day invitation-only executive-level conferences are designed to educate senior cyber professionals on the latest threat landscape. We're pleased to offer our listeners $100 off admission when you use code SECWEEK23. That's SEC Week 23 to register. Visit securityweekly.com/cybersecurity summit to learn more and register today. All right, for our first interview here, last week we talked with, hold on here. Do I have the right one here? Give me just a moment. I think my notes might be a little confused here, a little backwards here. Today we've got Tom Kellermann with us. He's the Senior Vice President of Cyber Strategy at Contrast Security. And today we're going to talk about the current impact of financial institutions and the current state of cyber attacks and why things aren't really working as smoothly as they should be. So welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's So you've got a report out, but we want to talk about more than just a report. And these reports are always interesting, to see what's actually happening on the ground, to understand what's actually happening in a lot of these breaches that occur. In fact, that's something that I do a lot on the side is I analyze these, especially when we have a lot of details of how these breaches go down. And I think there's a bit of, things shifted quite a bit in the last 10 years in how attacks happened. And I think one of the most important bits is not the piece that we see, not the malware that ends up on our systems, but kind of how, maybe Tom, you can talk a little bit about how these criminal organizations run and the important piece that changed on their side.
Sure. So, according to the World Economic Forum, the economy of scale of the dark web is the third largest economy in the world, over $1 trillion there. And you see this Pax Mafiosa that exists between intelligence services from 4 rogue nation states and these very significant cybercrime cartels. And they are cartels. They're very cartel-like in how they're structured in the professionalization of various skill sets. But also I would suggest for everyone to understand that the game has changed. They don't just want to burglarize the environment, they want to hijack it. And please don't limit your perspective here to ransomware. The adversary of today wants to turn your organization into a supply chain attack. Regardless if you're in technology or not, they literally want to enter your environment and use your digital transformation to launch attacks against your constituency. And so how you defend against that is really the name of the game. But you're also dealing with the same adversary that's willing to fight back when you respond to them. Counter-incident response is surging, and in many cases, they become truly punitive, and they'll drop wipers in your systems or ransomware NotPetya style to punish you when you react to them too loudly. And so for a long time, we've been defending against the breach, and now we have to defend against an adversary that's going to fight back in the environment, that's willing to become destructive, and most importantly, wants to use your infrastructure to attack your constituency.
Right, and I think the interesting thing here is for a long time, everything was very automated and opportunistic, right? It's just you'd release malware out into the wild, or set up, whatever malicious website you're going to send people to, and then do like a phishing campaign or something like that. And this kind of shift to focus on, getting into an environment, getting persistent, and kind of squeezing one organization for all they're worth. That's a big move, right?
It's a big move, and they also want to use the trust and confidence in the brand of that organization, the more significant the better, to launch attacks again from the digital environment that they've created. And so you have to be very concerned now as a security professional about your environment being used or your code being used to attack your constituency. And thus, you need to really defend from within, because you can't make an assumption that breach will never happen, particularly when you're dealing with adversaries that are working with intelligence services from an axis of evil in cyberspace comprised of obviously Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, all of which who are collaborating as evidenced by recent reports. Yeah, and I one of the things that I think irritate me the most is when I see things flagged as ransomware solutions, right? As if you could have, any one solution to, or any one product could solve the kind of broad opportunistic nature of these extortion campaigns, which even referring to extortion as ransomware also kind of irks me a little bit, because it's much broader than that. When we say ransomware, we're referring to step 17 of a long process that involves getting into your organization, laterally spreading around, making sure you can get back in even if they try and kick you out, the persistence, all that stuff. And I feel like it kind of does the industry a disservice when we just focus on that step 17, that piece of malware. What's that piece of malware doing? Oh, it's encrypting files. So the ransomware solution is better backups, right? Not so much, right? completely agree with you. And also, I think people forget two things about ransomware. So ransomware has become commodity attack code because of the nature of which these cybercrime cartels develop this ransomware and then, obviously sell it or lease it to affiliates who use it. But they do that for like three main reasons, one of which is those folks pay them. Number two is that whenever they deploy ransomware in the wild, the affiliate that is, there's always a rat associated with that, or another C2 on a sleep cycle that the primary developer of the ransomware can then just teleport themselves into the environment because you've just made them Johnny Appleseed, right? And beyond that, they can create a free fire zone, right, with a multiplicity of actors, right, that allow them to do long-term, more pernicious campaigns. But just in terms of reacting to ransomware in general, we need to remember that every single piece of ransomware out there deploys rats. So if you eradicate the ransomware, whether you do it legitimately or you pay for the key to decrypt it, or the law enforcement community gives you the key to decrypt it, and you feel like the problem is over because you've eliminated the presence of the malware on all your hosts, and you haven't evaluated whether the rat is still there, you're doing yourself a huge disservice, because that rat is used by access brokers. That rat is used by intelligence services to get back into your system unbeknownst to you.
Yeah, and then there's the other aspect of this, which you alluded to, in that as this evolves and they're now stealing your data and threatening to leak your data unless you pay. Now it's not about an encryption key anymore. It's about, just pay or I'm going to make this public. Now that works on many different fronts. It's not just the company that you can ransom for keeping that data private. It's the people who own that data, the employees, the customers, maybe your partners, because you've got data that more parties are concerned about than just the company that it was stolen from, right?
Very true. And in the cyber bank heist report that I authored, it's been writing for 6 years, it was notable that for the past few years that it became obvious to the participants in the study that adversaries, cybercrime cartels, and spies were targeting systems for the presence of non-public market information. They were trying to steal that non-public market information and use it for digital front running or digital insider trading. But it got worse than that. You see that become so mainstream now that you're seeing something called shoxing, which is they hack your system, they short your stock, and then they dox you. And this just highlights not only their understanding of the financial sector in the world we live in, but also the nature in which the crime has really moved from just extortion or theft of money to the theft of non-public market information and the utility of that to make trades.
So, what's your opinion before we get into the report? And I would like to get into the report here and some of the insights there. All the stuff that we're talking about does kind of revolve around the simplification of getting paid, where in the past they would steal data, they try and sell that data. A lot of overhead involved with trying to fence credit card numbers and get money out of people's accounts, buy iPhones, sell iPhones, stuff like that, versus, send some Bitcoin to this account. How sticky can that be? Is OFAC and KYC going to make a dent in any of these payments? I even heard last year we actually saw a decrease, at least according to the FBI, in the number of companies making payments, which is a good sign. But how long can this stick around? This and how can you KYC when you have no idea who it is that's attacking you?
So if you're talking about FBI stat vis-a-vis ransomware payments, yes, ransomware was less impactful last year. Ransomware was paid for less last year. There were some big wins and going after and taking down some crews and gangs and their infrastructure associated with that, as the FBI and others have taken their gloves off. But when it comes to KYC and OFAC and the rest of this, let's remember that the majority of ransomware payments are actually buttressing the economies who have been sanctioned, whether it be North Korea, Russia, Iran, or others. Those economies, even though it's not nation-state actors that are launching the ransomware at you, those cybercrime crews or cartels, depending on where you are beholden to the nation-state in order to maintain their untouchable status from Western law enforcement. If we don't go after regulating cryptocurrencies, specifically going after entities like Monero that are truly turning a blind eye to the tremendous amount of malicious activity and cybercrime conspiracies that are going on there. We'll never put a dent in this if you talk about following the money. I think those digital currencies and exchanges that want to become legitimate should be forced to abide by KYC, should at a minimum have the capacity to freeze transactions, and also collaborate with international law enforcement when it relates to a proven, verified cybercrime or child porn conspiracy.
Right. And so regulation of cryptocurrency is just something that's going to have to, I mean, on the one hand, thanks to the ledger, we can see where the money's going in a lot of these cases. I think Monero is a little bit more anonymous than Bitcoin, but Monero tends to be the one where they'll just put up the miners, right? Like they'll mine Monero using your infrastructure, using your electricity costs, whereas ransoms, do they still tend to be in things like Bitcoin and Ethereum?
They do, but also they're tumbled into other forms of virtual currencies, right? And then Monero seems to be one of the most widely accepted by the cybercrime cartels themselves. And it's not necessarily Monero participating in that economy of scale, but they're definitely turning a blind eye to it on purpose.
And we actually had here at Security Weekly, on one of the Security Weekly servers, had a Monero miner to deal with. There was I think Paul talked about it last night on Paul's Security Weekly, so check that out if you want to hear how one of our servers got hit. And they didn't really do much. They didn't get root access to the machine. They brute forced an account and just ran a script that mined Monero, and they did a cleanup of it, and Tyler Robinson helped with that. But just hitting close to home.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about so the report here. You say you've been doing this for 6 years. What are some, now that you kind of have that broad view that doing any similar report over a 6-year period, doing it once a year gives you, what were kind of the was there anything unexpected here, anything notably different that wasn't just kind of up and to the right, like the typical increases that you statistically expect when doing this kind of report?
So again, my perspective over the 6 years has changed. I was, chief cybersecurity officer at Carbon Black when I first started writing this, and then Carbon Black was acquired by VMware, and I was the head of cybersecurity strategy there. So I had different financial sector customers, right? And that some were more proactive than others. And now I'm at Contrast Security, where the majority of our customers are financial institutions. I'd say the attack vector of choice this year, and when it relates to just vectors, was APIs. And we really need to begin to pay attention to that. Many financial institutions are using APIs for various utilities, but particularly for electronic finance and for their migration to virtual currencies and other things, and also the APIs that are used for the development of their own code and applications. And API is now the new perimeter. So that's something I definitely noticed from a vector perspective that was significant. From an e-fraud perspective, it's something that I've already spoken to, but it's really this digital front running becoming more pervasive. But the two trends that continue to increase year over year, one is island hopping, which is basically they hijack your environment to use it to attack your constituency. And the other is this increase of destructive attacks. Whether those destructive attacks dramatically increase because of geopolitical tension, or whether they increase because of counter incident response, right? You're going to react to me, so I'm going to set your house on fire, is unbeknownst to me. But those trends continue to go up.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the destructive stuff, we tend to associate more with state-sponsored hacking, right? Like the Saudi Aramco case with Shamoon, where they, it impacted the global hard drive market because they, whatever that attack did, forced them to have to physically replace the storage devices. And so Saudi Aramco suddenly had to buy 30,000 storage devices, whether those were, I don't know if those were mechanical or SSDs or whatever, but yeah, it's scary stuff, especially as we go through times where there's chip shortages and stuff like that, like destroying equipment or destroying data. I don't know if you're talking about, from the AppSec perspective, you're probably talking about about software, maybe virtual instances and containers. No?
Look, no, adversaries sometimes will drop wipers in systems just to punitively punish the defender because you're trying to terminate their C2 or eliminate their rat, or you're attempting to fingerprint and tendril back to them. And there's no reporting requirements around that. In addition, the Russian government or intelligence services or cybercrime cartels, whatever you want to call that nexus of miscreants, they've released over 14 different new wipers, right, into the wild since the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine. And those are not just being used by the Russian intelligence services, they're being used by Russian cybercrime crews and cartels. This is compounded by the fact that sometimes actors will just use ransomware in a NotPetya fashion to punish you because you're reacting to them, or they'll turn on an encryption algorithm that was dormant on a system to punish you, to freeze you up while you try to react to them. So I think this really challenges, how we need to modernize incident response. We're being too loud, frankly, and we need to become more clandestine in how we react to these types of folks.
Oh, interesting. So they're actively watching for efforts to remove their stuff. That's
right. And that's why you always need to remember that these cybercrime crews, particularly the Russians, for example, always deploy a secondary C2 on a sleep cycle. So the second you terminate their original C2, they now know you're onto them. And now they're going to come back in and they may choose to become punitive.
Yeah. I remember the case with Code Spaces. That's how they went down. And that was all in AWS cloud, but basically they didn't check for backdoors before, resetting all the passwords and stuff like that, and they just deleted all their stuff, and they had everything in there, including their backups, was all in AWS, and it all got deleted. But
fun finding, injection attacks are increasing. And folks will say, Tom, I got a WAF. Well, WAFs are easily bypassed by coded commands or attacks from back-end systems that you may have a persistent presence on.
You're maybe going to slow them down for 10 minutes.
Or you just overwhelm them, right? And then there's too much noise. But the reality is that injection attacks are back. They're here to stay. We need to really from a vector perspective, we need to pay close attention to how we actually protect in runtime.
Yeah. Yeah, and so back to the wipers. Are those mostly wiping data off the systems? Or are you also seeing cases where maybe they'll brick the firmware and make the hardware device unusable as well?
Both. And both, again, it's not specific to my vantage just at Contrast. It's specific to the dozens of financial institutions who participated in this study. And so depends on the institution, depends on whether the institution in many cases participated or complied with economic sanctions against a specific nation state. You will see much more virulence by the threat actors in that regard.
So there's so many components to these attacks, so I think, maybe next we can talk a bit about where are defenders' efforts best spent here? It's already interesting, something I hadn't really heard anybody say before is that defenders need to be more clandestine, to avoid the attacker taking any kind of, causing any damage. But where else, across this whole attack chain, should we be focusing our efforts, or should we even be focused on the attack chain and more focused on just getting some fundamental security stuff in place that a lot of companies don't already have?
So I would suggest that we need to invert the security paradigm, move away from the defense in depth, castle-like structure of the standards bodies, and really move towards something that looks much more like a Supermax prison. And I say that because I live in Colorado and the original one's down the road here. And the Supermax prison was developed not only by the best social psychologists in the world, but the best prison architects. And the reason why they use social psychologists is because they realized that the worst of the worst prisoners in the world, whether they be terrorists or criminals, has cults of personality and ended up taking over the prisons from inside out, right? And these geniuses, these Machiavellian geniuses per se, had to be dealt with in a psychological fashion as well as an architectural fashion. And I think that's what we need to fight for. We need to inhibit the capacity of the adversary to move freely in a lateral fashion through our environments. We need to inhibit the capacity of the adversary to garner external resources in the environment. We need to inhibit their capacity to leave the environment with anything from the environment. We need to inhibit their capacity to be situationally aware in our environment. And so I really challenge us all to believe in this construct of defending from within. And how do we achieve what's called intrusion suppression, right? So can you detect, can you deceive, can you contain and divert and then hunt an adversary unbeknownst to an adversary? And really to do that, I think we need to deal with a number of things. I do think XDR is part of the answer there because it provides us with greater situational awareness across networks and endpoints, regardless of whether you believe in the open XDR model or the closed. I do think that we need to really focus on, the vectors of a choice today are API attacks and injection attacks to get in. And many of those attacks can be solved for with runtime protection. I think we need to increase weekly threat hunting, but also expand that to the board, expand that to the C-level, which has always been taboo for us as threat hunters, given my background. I do think micro-segmentation of networks is an imperative. Just-in-time administration coupled with, complete least privilege should be an imperative. No one should have administrative rights in perpetuity. I think we need to do a better job of defending our APIs or understanding even how many we have and where they end. And then I think we can do more interesting things like employing micro-sharding for the exfiltration of data or using more deception technology along attack paths that we can't truly harden. But we need to get beyond perimeter defense. We need to invert the security paradigm, make it look much more like a supermax prison than a castle.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting some Arkham Asylum Joker vibes here with you talking about the cults of personality and taking over the prison. Maybe talking about some zero trust ideas here. And that lateral movement is just way too easy inside environments, and a lot of it's Windows, right? It's still just Active Directory and Windows that partially, at least from what I'm seeing, that makes it so easy to grab creds and move around.
Agreed. But with zero trust, I think zero trust needs to itself be modernized just a bit, which is verify then trust. And continuously verify, and not just identities, but applications and environments, and verify through ground truth, through having sufficient telemetry, that there are no behavioral anomalies existing in those environments, in those applications, etc. As it relates to Microsoft Active Directory and other challenges that they face, there's a trend now. I call it reverse business email compromise that is ongoing, particularly in the financial sector, where the adversary will basically hijack the administrative rights to the O365 environment. And then they'll use that to selectively send fileless malware via email to the board, to C-level folks, etc., thus attacking them from inside out. It was a pioneered technique by Turla, which is a famous Russian group, but it's becoming much more mainstream. And we need to be very concerned with those types of trends.
So when you were explaining this philosophy of architecting from the inside out, it makes a lot of sense, but you talked a lot about the technological things that companies can do. And we all know that technologies in and of themselves, that's just a piece of the puzzle. So from a processes point of view, from a people point of view, how do we update and upgrade? Because I agree with you. I think that this is zero trust, but it's not just the small piece of zero trust that has been marketed to us. I think zero trust in its original description was much broader than identities, or at least, human identities or device identities. So how do you incorporate all of that? How do you broaden that out to make sure that the people and the processes are keeping up with the technologies? Because you can't just plug and play in XDR or any of the other technologies that you mentioned and expect it to keep all the criminals in their cells.
Completely agree. I think it begins with a mission statement and the thesis that, as a successful corporation, government agency in today's world, the adversaries that you face want to hijack your environment and use it to attack your constituency. So this is now a brand protection mission, because your brand is going to be used, and the digital essence of your brand and the connective tissue you have with the outside world will be used to attack your constituency. So you're trying to solve for that now. And in doing that, you really want to manifest through policies, procedures, and technologies this construct of intrusion suppression. How, in the end of days, will you detect, divert, deceive, contain, and hunt an adversary unbeknownst to an adversary because you don't want that escalation I've described? And so if you weave your policies, procedures, and technologies around that subset, I think you'll be more sustainable and more vigilant in your posture given today's world.
That, of course, brings up the issue that this makes defending a lot more complicated, right?
True.
Because this is ongoing. It's always evolving. It's taking the behavioral aspects into account. It's not a static thing. And with so few people, well, I don't want to say so few people, but with not enough staff in a lot of organizations, what are some of the ways companies can handle that?
True. Well, first, from a governance perspective, and this must happen. I'm hoping it happens with regulation someday, but CISOs should be reporting directly to CEOs. Enough already. We need the defensive coordinator reporting to the head coach, not to the offensive coordinator, which is what I call a CIO. In addition, I'm hoping the SEC tentative guidance does mandate that cybersecurity specialists have to be on boards, so that the CISO has that advocate and that second pair of eyes on the boards to change the culture that we've been enduring for a long time now, which is this culture that the internet technology is pacific versus the guerrilla warfare that we see out there on a regular basis. In addition, I think the metrics should change to mean time to remediation of the campaign, MTTR of the campaign itself, not just of the vulnerability, the gap, the configuration change, etc. But yeah, I'm hoping that consumers and other businesses begin to judge companies they conduct business with specific to initially that they care about security because they do have a CISO that reports to their CEO, that they do have a cybersecurity specialist on their board, that they do believe in constructs like zero trust and intrusion suppression, that they are investing a significant portion of their IT budget in sustainable IT, which is cybersecurity.
And to build on Katie's question, operationally, how are you seeing people get better at hunting? You know, because in my experience, and I've been on both sides, but I specifically attempted to build some services that would help companies do this. And I see a few companies doing it now, but I don't want to lead the answer to the question. But yeah, how do you know that you're able to detect stuff without just waiting for the attack to happen? How do you operationally get better at hunting and knowing whether or not you're going to be seen? Like the next thing that you do is going to get caught and trigger them. Yeah.
So obviously I came out of Carbon Black. We pioneered EDR, and now EDR has evolved into XDR, and everyone's moving down that pipeline. But it goes beyond that. If you don't have enough people to truly man the hunt teams and to truly effectively understand the telemetry, then I do believe in outsourcing to MDR firms. But the MDR firm that you outsource to shouldn't be the cheapest, and it should also be the one that has the most knowledge of your industry. Like they should be really focused on, let's just say, the financial sector, and that's why they have greater knowledge and context around that. I do think there's a nexus as well between threat hunters and cyber threat intelligence. Tailored cyber threat intelligence like Intel 471 and others, complete with, kind of support from an MDR firm when needed or an IR firm that understands your space. But if you don't have the bodies, you don't have the staff, I do believe in the MDR community. Not all MDRs are equal, as we all know here. And not all MSSPs are equal either.
And speaking of detecting the attackers, you mentioned deception, I think, at some point here. What kind of a role? Yeah.
I'm a big fan of deception. You know, I was on the advisory board for Ativo. I was one of the original investors in TrapX. I think there's a lot of utility in deception, and the utility of deception for attack paths that can't be hardened, deception to be used to divert adversaries from critical assets, and deception to be used to get telemetry on adversaries. I think there's a long-term discussion about active defense and the viability, where it ends and begins. I don't think the legal world has really wrapped their heads around, well, can I actually destroy my data fully when it leaves my environment and enters another environment? Am I allowed to track my own data when it leaves, et cetera, et cetera? And so I'm looking forward to those court cases playing out eventually.
Yeah, and so you mentioned earlier, just want to run back to a few things here. You mentioned getting admin access to things like Microsoft 365, maybe Google Workspace, attacking employees from the inside, you know, basically looking like an internal employee. Do you have any insight into how they're getting that level of access? So
we call it RBEC, reverse business email compromise. And It was pioneered by Turla, Turla, and there's an entire kill chain specific to Turla on MITRE's website. And that's how they initially began to achieve that type of access. But nowadays, one of the challenges with detection response, whether it's MDR or XDR, is that they have no visibility below the waterline. They can see everything that's occurring at the network level and the endpoint level, but they really don't have any understanding of what's going on in their applications. And I'm not talking about SBOMs. I'm not talking about vulnerabilities in code, but they don't really understand what their applications are doing when they're running. And many times applications can be used through routes as a new form of lateral movement, which is probably why I'm here at Contrast.
Right. You can't put a runtime agent on Microsoft 365 because it's a SaaS app, right?
Right. Now, runtime can be used in SaaS environments, and they can be used on legacy environments. But I think a lot of people are accustomed to the whole construct of RASP, but RASP has been modernized since the days of the original RASPs. And RASP can actually provide you with that visibility, but also the route coverage you need to understand, like, what is this app trying to communicate with what host, and what is it actually doing? And especially when you invert the security paradigm to understand that the adversary of today that's targeting you wants to use your code, wants to use your network, wants to use your endpoints to attack your constituency. They don't want to just rob you. And that's really the cultural and defensive shift that's necessitated here, is that recognition.
Right. Yeah, understanding the adversary's motivations and, to understand how they're going to go after this stuff, definitely. A few more. Yeah, so runtime protection, totally agree with you there. I think the wonderful thing about RASP and runtime protection is that when you're that close, when you have that perspective, evasions don't really work anymore, right? Because you can directly see the outcome and the actions of those things. Whereas in a WAF or something like that's inline, evasions seem a lot tougher, to more like a game of leapfrog there.
And WAFs can't see when the attack from behind, right? When a back-end system is attacking.
Exactly.
With the WAF protecting, and you can't, you know what I'm saying? So it's just crazy. But beyond all that, I just want to say this, that I think we really need to pay attention to this, the future of TTPs. And the future of TTPs are going to be within applications. Because as we've known for a long time, TTPs are typically relegated to the network traffic layer, to the endpoints, behavioral anomalies on both of those. But when you think about the fact that most defenders and most MDR firms and most XDR capabilities have no visibility into the code, then things get really interesting, which is why Log4j is still a problem. And those type of 0 days are being used to manifest. It's still a huge problem out there.
And there was another term that you used that I don't think I fully understand. When you were talking about island hopping, I'm just trying to grok exactly what that is and who's being targeted in that situation. Maybe if you could give an example of island hopping.
So SolarWinds was an island hop. Now you're going to say, well, Tom, that's a supply chain attack. And the reason why recouched it as island hopping, is that if you merely think that supply chain attacks only happen to tech vendors, you're wrong. The name of the game now is to get into your environment, regardless of how they get in, and then to use your supply chain, your information supply chain, your customers, etc., as an island hop. Make sense? So that's why I call it island hopping, because when people hear supply chain attack, they think, oh, technology firm, bad at security, their customers got polluted. But the type of adversary that's willing to do that isn't going to get to the customer and then stop. You know what I mean? They're going to keep going because it's been very successful for them to leapfrog continuously through and through.
Right. It's the benefit of, hack once, benefit many times. I guess is kind of the idea here. Getting access to well, again, it goes back to the same thinking as, hey, if I steal your data, I can not only ransom you, but I can ransom your employees, I can ransom your customers, I can ransom all these groups at the same time, and get paid 2, 3, 4 times. It's
and
like
6% of the financial institutions that participated in the study this year said that they saw the adversaries attempting to use their infrastructure to attack their constituencies. That's
as a
crazy.
stepping off point. Yeah.
It's like you're going to the bank and then you're being held hostage in the bank.
Well, everything's as hyper connected as everything is. Like we were talking about SaaS. Why wouldn't I go after the and we've seen companies go after, you're talking about not all MDR firms are the same. We've seen MSSPs targeted, right?
Yep. Successfully so. And so, back to the original questions that were asked, we really need to invert the security paradigm. We must defend from within. It is a holistic approach. If you believe in zero trust, then please apply more broadly than just to identities. Please be able to verify, then trust continuously, right? And then understand that the adversaries that you face today are willing to become destructive. And the name of the game for them is to hijack your digital transformation.
I think that's, I couldn't have written a better wrap to this interview than that, Tom. Thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. This has been great.
I appreciate you very much. Have a great weekend.
All right, and stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk securing open source software with Donald Fischer from Tidelift. When organizations face poor web performance, challenges building modern applications at scale, or need to reduce operational and development costs, they turn to Fastly. Fastly's distributed edge network means your business can unleash its growth potential without worrying about scaling your infrastructure, whether for growth of users, transaction volume, or geographic expansion. Get the speed, security, and edge cloud innovation you need to deliver profitable and engaging experiences. Visit securityweekly.com/Fastly for more information or to speak to an expert. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on their 2023 RSA Conference full conference pass. RSA Conference will take place April 24th through 27th in San Francisco and on demand. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC 2023 and use the code 53UCyber. That's 53, the letter U, Cyber. We hope to see you there. And I will be there. I'll be doing some interviews for Security Weekly, and I'll be there all week. I'll be there from Sunday through Friday, so definitely hit me up if you want to say hello. All right, so last week we talked with Josh Corman about the White House's national cybersecurity strategy, and this week we're continuing that conversation with Donald Fischer about the impact on organizations building with open source, which was certainly something that the strategy touched on. Donald is the CEO and co-founder of Tidelift, an organization focused on securing open source software. He was previously in the investor world at both General Catalyst and Greylock. He has also been an executive at Lightbend and, very appropriately for this conversation, Red Hat. Welcome to the show, Donald.
Delighted to be here. Thanks for letting me join.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. This is I like getting the conversation close together, where we kind of have this ongoing discussion about. I think initially when I saw the White House cybersecurity strategy, I was a little bit nonplussed. I thought, okay, this is a good recognition of what's going on right now, what has been going on. Like we've made some good progress. I feel like CISA's done some good stuff. We've I felt like we were finally getting to a point where the government was starting to get it, or at least we had people in the U.S. government who were starting to get it. And then, I think Josh Corman made me realize, maybe this was a bit more impactful than I was giving it credit when we had him on last week. So yeah, I'm excited to continue this discussion because I don't think we've touched on the open source piece of this as much.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed last week's episode. I thought there was a really great dive onto some of the broad areas impacted by the national cybersecurity strategy, including around critical infrastructure and so on. But yeah, my focus is mostly on the application development part, and particularly the, as you said, the open source software element of all of this. And there's considerable impact, we think, coming out of the new strategy that's going to impact folks that are building open source software, people that are building with open source software, which is most people building software applications these days.
Yeah. And there's always been that question hanging out that I think, as is typical, an XKCD article perfectly puts when they show the building blocks and the tiny piece near the bottom. That's just a single open source maintainer that if that part's removed, the whole thing collapses. And that's what I think of. I think of that comic every time I think about this problem of, who's making sure that single maintainer of this critical package didn't just sell it to a cybercrime enterprise, or hasn't just what happens if they just give up on it and they stop maintaining it. It's the level of dependence we have on open source combined with the lack of a plan to ensure that open source is safe and secure and supported. It gives me some anxiety.
Yeah, I think rightfully so. And the XKCD, I was glad to hear that comic reference the famous XKCD dependencies comic that shows all of modern digital infrastructure sitting atop a random package that somebody's been thanklessly maintaining since 2003. And it's funny, but it's also true. One of the funny things about that cartoon is that it understates the problem, because so many applications don't depend on just one dependency like that, one under-maintained or overlooked dependency. Most applications depend on thousands of them, right? And we've seen through recent events, like what happened with the incidents around the Log4Shell episode just over a year ago, the profound impact that can have on application teams that are building with open source. So, for me, I think it's really, the key question is one of incentives. How are we going to design this in a way so that we're not just all winging it and hoping for the best, but how can we create some of the right behaviors and mechanisms to align the creators and users of open source software? And on that point, I'm very optimistic. I think that there's a lot of room for innovative approaches here, doing my best to help contribute some energy there with the work that we're doing at Tidelift. And I think that my take on the U.S. government efforts here is, I think they're pretty well designed, and I've been really impressed. I think it's refreshed my personal confidence in the technical capabilities and the ability for the U.S. government to access technical talent who gets it and can help design policies that are going to make sense in the long run here. But a lot to talk through in terms of what's actually being required and what are the parts that we still need some building to figure out.
Yeah, so let's let's start at the scope, because I think we've seen things in the past that were pretty impressive in how forward-looking they were and what they covered, but they were, specifically for organizations selling to U.S. government agencies, right? And so the scope was a bit smaller, and we expected the impact of that to be a bit smaller. I think that's M2218, maybe.
Yeah, I call
so
it
what are we talking about?
It rolls off the tongue. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are we talking about here? What's the, with this strategy, or, is the scope everybody? Is it private and public, or, are we still, what we're going to see in the short term, is it still going to be specifically addressing organizations selling to the U.S. government?
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting and important elements of the new U.S. national cybersecurity strategy, is that it expands the conversation here. So, that M2218 memo that you're referring to, that came out in September of 2022, and that was put forth by the Office of Management and Budget, sort of the part of the White House that puts requirements on executive branch agencies. And the M2218 memo, it was helpful because it made things more concrete. It got into some more details, building on some of the activities that started with the May 2021 presidential order on executive order on cybersecurity. So that M2218, it said, hey, organizations that are supplying U.S. government agencies are now going to need to meet some new requirements. They're going to need to, among other things, provide a software bill of materials, the notorious SBOM acronym, that just defines what are the ingredients that are going into this software. And that OMB guidance, M2218, required suppliers to the U.S. government to self-attest that they are following secure software development practices. And the definition of those secure software development practices is a big PDF document that was compiled by the National Institute of Standards and Technology that's called the NIST Secure Software Development Framework. And it's a pretty comprehensive and pretty reasonable broad set of considerations to take into account when building any software. So that was all the, before the National Cybersecurity Strategy was released. Now, what the National Cybersecurity Strategy has done is to expand the scope of folks who need to be paying attention to things like the NIST Secure Software Development Framework to really not just organizations that are supplying the government, as you say, but any organization providing services using software in the US. And the key mechanism for that is a shift in how cybersecurity liability is going to work. And the cybersecurity strategy document goes into some detail about how they envision this happening. Historically, most of us are familiar with the liability regime in software being all risk is borne by the end user. Right. Yeah. All those big caps paragraphs when you click through the license agreement, no warranties expressed or implied. And that's been convenient for software makers, but that's not how it works in other key industries, right? So, you look at automotive industries, the steering wheel comes off your Tesla while you're driving down the highway. It's a pretty big problem for Tesla. It's not buyer beware. And in pharmaceuticals, if there's a contamination in a manufacturing line, that's going to be an issue that the manufacturer needs to contend with. They're going to bear some of the liability for that, or they're going to expressly bear the liability for that. It just hasn't been the regime in software. But one of the key takeaways from the National Cybersecurity Strategy is that is now the policy of the current administration, is they want to shift liability to organizations that are producing software.
And I always wondered when that age would come. So we used to get, I remember me and my ex-boss and good friend Wendy Nather getting interviewed about exactly this nearly 10 years ago at RSA. And Wendy's prediction, I think back then, was we would just have to see more deaths, because your comparisons there are comparisons where human safety, comes into the conversation, and we might, be kind of getting to that point with IoT. We had Grace on from the IOXT Alliance a couple episodes ago. And, I just saw in the news there's a company who makes garage door openers and alarm systems and stuff like that, and all easily defeatable. And the company's not responding to the researcher. So, just a classic IoT problem, but with something that secures your house and keeps your doors closed. So maybe we are getting to that point where we can do something about this before it becomes an issue. More with more sad stories about concerning human safety.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find a system in modern civilization that doesn't have some software dependency now involved, right? You think about critical systems in critical infrastructure applications and so on. So I think, for the reality is that lives are on the line here, and I think that's why the U.S. government has taken this shift in their position. I mean, one of the ways that I captured the intent in some of the briefings running up to the release of the new National Cybersecurity Strategy, and some of the briefing around it was, one of the officials said, voluntary measures have proven insufficient, which rings true to me in software systems. And so now we're going to try something different where we're going to make it mandatory. And I think it's appropriate. By the way, I was glad to hear you raise Wendy's name there, because I think she's great and has excellent perspectives on all of this. So that's a great touch point.
Yeah, she was one of my mentors. So that's awesome. Absolutely. That's I remember us having these conversations back 2013, 2014. So yeah, it's cool to see it happening. I mean, this feels quick, compared to other industries. Of course, tech and software moves quickly, but to see the amount of progress we've made in 10 years or just less than 10 years. Talking to Josh Corman and his I Am the Cavalry group, it just feels like it's moved a lot quicker than other industries, having to wait decades. I feel like you talk about the automotive industry, a lot of the safety regulations with tens of thousands of people dying every year still took decades, for seatbelts and things like that to all go in, crumple zones, crash testing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one of the things I think is, again, kind of constructive about the way that this is being put forth in the pretty all-encompassing and broad strategy here is that it's not just a naked assignment of liability saying, hey, this is your problem now, good luck. There's specific guidance that's being given. And one of the things that's an interesting nuance of the National Cybersecurity Strategy is that it talks about not just this new liability framework and assignment of liability, but it also talks about a safe harbor, the concept of a safe harbor, so that organizations that can demonstrate that they are taking due care, that they're following, the recommended practices, they will receive some relief from, the liability actions that may come if bad incidents happen anyways. And, one of the realities of software is even if you do everything right, sometimes just the complexity piles up and something's going to happen. But I love the fact that there is this explicit path to say, hey, it's not just you're liable and now you have to deal with it. It's like you're liable, do something about it. And there's specific guidance again here given around what you should be doing. And one of the things that's helpful about all of these recent U.S. policy initiatives is that they're kind of pointing in the same direction. They're using the same definitions. And once again, we see in the context of the National Cybersecurity Strategy, the secure software development framework being referenced there. So, I like that there's a path to where we need to go. That's part of the overall strategy.
So I love this direction too. I think it's great that we're starting to make some progress, but the skeptical side of me wonders how much of this is going to go the way of GDPR, where certain companies say, well, I'm just going to take the fine because that's a lot easier and cheaper than actually building these checks and balances. What are your thoughts on that? How do you think this could potentially go, especially at the early stages?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the one thing that's helpful in this circumstance or in this context is that the recommended practices, or now the required practices to access that safe harbor from the new liability regime, they're also common sense good things to be doing, right? This is just another reason to undertake these diligent cybersecurity, secure software development practices. So it's not an exercise where the only reward is that you get the gold star or the check the box around complying with the regulations. It's also helpful to your organization because no organization wants to have data breaches, system compromise, et cetera. So in that sense, maybe this is a better, a slightly more aligned set of requirements than some of the privacy things that maybe run a little bit further afield from folks' core business needs.
I hope so.
Me too.
Yes. So you talked a bit about mechanisms here, and this is something that's still not entirely clear to me. Like Pillar 3 talks a lot about the organizations that can bear the cost, bearing the cost of this liability shift. So all of a sudden, I'm thinking about, okay, maybe I build a product, and there's plenty of cases where, your terms and conditions, your contract, the company you're paying is clear, but is there liability downstream where maybe between the consumer and the product, whether it's B2B or B2C, that piece of it's pretty clear. But then, like, I've got some open source in here, I've got some commercial libraries built in here. Maybe I'm probably using some cloud services. We've seen tenant breaks in, I think, all three of the major public clouds. We saw OpenAI have a data leak due to a bug in Redis. And then it brings into play the question about insurance and the role that insurance plays here. So what are the mechanisms, I guess, first of all, that are going to protect consumers and enterprises here? Who's going to enforce that bit of it, that initial piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think both of those stakeholders are important. End consumers, enterprises that are consuming. Then there's the software producers, final software assemblers, I think is some of the language that's used there. Another stakeholder I would love to introduce into the conversation, though, are the independent open source maintainers, because they're going to be a really necessary part of the solution here. And one of the really, again,
and sorry if I can just interrupt real quick. Like, we don't want a chilling effect where they're like, you know what, it's not worth maintaining this anymore if you throw a bunch of requirements on me.
Absolutely. And in some of the parallel efforts that are going on right now that are well intentioned, there have been some concerns there. So an example is in a relatively parallel effort in the EU. There's a proposed language called the EU Cyber Resilience Act, and in that it also took into account this. It had a discussion around the concept of shifting software cybersecurity liability, but in that case, it was a plain read of the language would suggest that individual open source maintainers could be personally liable for cybersecurity vulnerabilities in their open source projects that led to harm for a downstream user of that project. That's really concerning. Certainly to the
we've seen
individual
CISOs,
open source maintainers.
We've seen CISOs held personally liable for issues that happen on their watch. For
sure. Yeah. I mean, it gets really tangible and immediate when it comes down to individual liability, right? So, there's been a lot of discussion around that. What I think is really either an oversight or a defect in the initial language for the European Cyber Resilience Act. I was glad to see, just to contrast, and probably taking some learnings from that conversation, the National Cybersecurity Strategy. It explicitly calls out that individual open source maintainers should not bear personal responsibility for cybersecurity vulnerabilities in their open source projects, but instead, as you had said a little earlier in this discussion, organizations that are best equipped to deal with this should be where the liability and the responsibility lie. So I was glad to see that there's a explicit appreciation for open source creators and making sure that we don't break a system or really impede the creative energy that comes from open source, the open source community. It's good to see that recognized in the strategy.
Yeah, definitely. So insurance providers, we've seen some concerns about whether or not cybersecurity is even worth providing. We've seen some, obviously, there's still providers out there. A few of them pulled out. A lot of them have kind of changed how they put together policies, how they price policies. The kind of hoops you have to jump through to get a policy. Some of that's changed, but it's still around. And despite some comments that maybe it's not tenable. There was a Swiss banker that I think made a comment there, but yeah, how does that fit in here? That's because I know I mentioned the CISOs. They're personally getting insurance to cover them personally for when certain things happen here. In case they're civilly sued, for things that happen in a breach. We saw FTC require Drizzly's CISO, like for the next 20 years, he has FTC requirements hanging over his head. Right. Like he has to have they're kind of vague requirements. They're very, have a full cybersecurity program, limit your collection of data from customers, that kind of thing. But what about these individual maintainers? Like, all of a sudden, do they need to go out and get their own, liability insurance?
Yeah, so my understanding of from reading the National Cybersecurity Strategy is that it's explicitly taking into account that individual independent open source maintainers should not be held liable, should not bear liability for cybersecurity issues in their packages, which is good because it's just kind of unworkable. It would break the ability for individuals to contribute to open source in so many ways if that were the regime that came into effect. But organizations that are consuming open source components from those individual creators and assembling them into products that are then provided to downstream organizations and consumers, they are the explicit focus for this new cybersecurity liability. And so for them, I think there are all these questions around how is the cyber insurance industry going to evolve to for that new set of parties who are going to be bearing the responsibility here. And however that happens, an essential part of this is going to be implementing systems that both allow you to follow the recommended guidance in terms of ensuring that the software that you are incorporating into your product or that you are developing net new as part of your product, that they follow these secure software development framework practices, right? And so, whether that's to provide evidence to your cyber insurance policy provider to, induce them to underwrite your organization, or whether that's evidence that you want to have on hand for the best practices that you've been following in the event that there is a, episode where somebody suffers damages because of a cybersecurity breach that your software producing organization was involved in. You're going to want to have that concrete record that, provides evidence of what precautions you were taking and what you were able to verify along the way. And a really, really hard part of that question, again, is how do you do that for this software that basically your organization downloaded from GitHub or a community package manager? How do you actually make that? How do you demonstrate that evidence? How do you attest that those practices were followed?
Right. Yeah, and maybe help me out here if there's like a major leg of this kind of conversation that we're leaving out here. But I was going to kind of shift towards talking about the value or lack of value in SBOMs.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that that's a good place to go next. That's an important part of the conversation is, what is the role of software bills of material? Yeah. So I mean, again, to talk about the reason I got so excited about IOXT Alliance is I didn't realize that there were already companies doing certifications, had designed these security labels. And it's fascinating, like the amount of information they have on their website. There's a dispute certification because a lot of these, the vast majority, are self-certified. So you can file a dispute, that this certification isn't deserved or maybe it's not true. And you can also report a vulnerability, which I think is fantastic. And it's got all these details like, are you doing code signing? Are you limiting downgrade attacks? Is there like a single default password or not? And just tons and tons of details on each of these devices. Of course, this is all voluntary at this point, so hopefully we see, some regulation around. And it's they say they're focused on consumer now, but a lot of these are prosumer, kind of like small business stuff. There's a lot of stuff here that you would see inside enterprises, but I don't know. I kind of like IoT when talking about SBOMs because I think that's one of those places where it really truly is a black box. It can be tricky to understand what if Log4j is inside your network devices, for example. Yeah, for sure. And the other consideration when it comes to SBOM, software bills of material, is that once you have a list of what's inside your application or device. Okay, that's a necessary prerequisite to answering a question. Okay, what are the facts about that, right? Like, what are the attributes that software has? I mean, it's one thing to have a list of the names of the packages and the versions of the open source packages in the case of open source components, but it's a whole other thing to know, okay, well, what is actually true about those? And this is one place where we've been doing some work at Tidelift to contribute to the conversation. In fact, just a couple days ago, we published a proposed specification to contribute an idea in this space. We called ours TACOS, the Trusted Attestation and Compliance for Open Source format. And basically, what this is about is
excellent acronym.
Yeah, it's actually building on some of the heritage. It is National
Burrito Day. It's National Burrito Day, not National Taco Day today, though. But yeah, it's close enough. We're trying
to celebrate a tradition here in software supply chain security. There's some predecessors like the Salsa framework from Google. There's a project called Guac. So stay on topic there. But yeah, what it's basically about is, okay, let's go to the next step after building an ingredients list and say, what are the known facts about those ingredients? And specifically, tying this back to the national cybersecurity strategy is how can we get attestations from the folks that made these open source components that they followed these secure development practices at the moment of creation and packaging? And it's a hard question to answer because you can't, without having a way to convey that additional contextual information, there's no way to just grab a package from NPM, a JavaScript package, and inspect it to know, was that developed in a secure environment? Was there two-factor authentication on all of those systems? Was it packaged in a robustly secured environment, et cetera, et cetera? So we have to ask those questions and document those attestations somehow in the chain of custody of that software. And that TACOS is just one potential standard, one proposed standard for how you could capture that information to make those software bills of material more useful for answering the questions at hand.
Well, and there's so many nuances here as well. And I love that you use the NPM example here, because we learned, a couple months back, I think it was a show last year, we talked about, somebody was leveraging NPMs to install. It wasn't malware, it was crypto miners, right? Like, it's always like somebody gets access to like the entire Fortune 500, and that's how creative they get, is let's mine some Monero, when they could do all kinds of other crazy stuff with it. But we found out where you pull in NPM from matters, because the way they had done it is they didn't touch the actual code in the NPM. They did it through the NPM install script, which, before that story came out, I hadn't really played with NPM, so I didn't even realize the install script was a thing. And so you've got this one script that's designed to run on Windows, Linux, whatever platform you install stuff on. And, if you just grabbed the NPM package directly off of GitHub, you would have been fine. But if you installed it directly from the NPM repository, you would have gotten that malware, because you would have run the install script, which is not actually part of the NPM package, but it is related to it. And the only thing protecting it is that one developer's account that they had no MFA enabled for. And it was shortly after that all of a sudden we see NPM and PyPy and all these repositories starting to require MFA, second factor logins for like the developers of the top 100,000 packages, or I forget what portion of it was.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, we're lucky that most of the attacks have been fairly benign in that sense, that they've been cryptocurrency mining as opposed to information exfiltration attacks. But I don't think we can really count on that being the case in the future, especially once these methods of exploitation become revealed and publicized like this, right? So, but it gets to that point that so much of the prior generation it wasn't called this, but the, open source compliance or the prior generation of software supply chain security, I guess, was so myopically focused on the National Vulnerability Database, CVEs. Does the version of the package that I'm using have a known CVE vulnerability in it? Yes or no? That's useful, right? But that's a very minimum standard. It's a necessary but insufficient criteria for declaring victory around the security of your software supply chain. And so I think these new efforts, some of them anchored in government defined practices such as the NIST Secure Software Development Framework, but also others coming from industry consortia and collaboration, like the OpenSSF Scorecards project coming from the Open Source Software Security Foundation. I think these are all constructive ways to broaden the aperture here and say, okay, it's more than just detecting known vulnerabilities. That's almost like a virus scanner mentality to security in my view. We have to think about, okay, what are all of the health attributes? What are the process elements that we are ensuring around this software so that we can head off attacks, not just remediate known vulnerabilities.
And to that point, I think one of the criticisms of SBOMs is that they don't go quite far enough. That just understanding what components are in there, isn't quite enough information. Like if you take the SolarWinds case, there's, and I think I've seen some efforts, maybe from what's it called, Cyclone DX, where they have some extensions where they go to, like should this piece of software be just reaching out to updates.solarwinds.com, or I'm seeing mine reach out to soccerfans.ru. Is that normal? So the behaviors of the software, how important do you think it is for us to move beyond just here's the components within the software to, okay, here's also the expected behavior, the network endpoints, you should see this reaching out to as kind of a key example of that behavior.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's another dimension that you can take this in, if you have the sort of virus scanner mentality there, known defects that you're looking for, signatures almost, you can go in the direction of, okay, let's try to document, first, articulate what are the desired secure development practices to be followed, and then have a way to validate that those are being followed, carry through attestations about them being followed. And then a third direction to go that I think you're alluding to is actually looking at the behavior, the discernible behavior, either at runtime or before runtime, by analyzing software artifacts to determine, what network endpoints are they going to reach out to, et cetera. Usually, I guess the lesson of computer security is defense in depth. Multiple approaches overlapping in scope will probably be where we arrive here. But I'm just gratified that the conversation is finally advancing beyond a list of virus scanner signatures for your software packages and a list of ingredients. I mean, those are good first steps, but we got to get more sophisticated as the attacks and vulnerability landscape gets more sophisticated.
Right, because when you look at a lot of these attacks, like individually, they look pretty easy to detect and prevent. So for SolarWinds, all you had to do was know what a normal baseline was for it and enforce that normal baseline. And, one of the examples coming out of the Log4Shell are, companies that don't just let random software from servers talk out to the internet, that have some kind of, default deny outbound from these systems did just fine, because the callback couldn't make it back out, so you couldn't then talk to that vulnerable component. But yeah, once you add all those up and you consider that, you've got tens of thousands of different components and each has their own baseline and each has their, their own things, policies that you would have to enforce for it. it starts to look like, okay, maybe I need some kind of software solution to do this for me, or, it'd be great if the company could just give me some kind of YAML or, some kind of file that has that baseline embedded within it. And like, here's what our software should normally do. Anything outside, what's defined in this bit of YAML, consider that something to alert on.
Yeah, that's an interesting direction. And I mean, that sort of, runtime, operational containment mechanism is important for, end applications that are getting deployed, and that can defend against some attacks, but it's co-equally important for the build environments where those packages are being put together, right? And so that's yet another, I think, reason or, rationale for emphasizing, hey, let's look all the way up the chain of custody to where this software is created and make sure that the build environment isn't allowing, network traffic from hostile, network endpoints is going to, basically find its way into all the downstream applications as well.
All right. Anything else significant from the White House cybersecurity strategy that we haven't touched on that you think is pretty relevant for people to hear about?
I mean, there's one more part that strikes close to home for my personal interests, and also the areas that we're focused on here at Tidelift, which is open source software developers, right? The open source software community. One of the, I think, undersold aspects of the national cybersecurity strategy is that there's an express declaration in there, I think it's in the 4th section, about the fact that the U.S. government wants to get more proactively, directly involved in open source communities, right? It talks about, in partnership with the private sector and the open source software community, the U.S. federal government will continue to invest in the development of secure software. Talks about memory safe languages, which I know is probably a
can
great,
we call this the Rust
fans out there.
Rust initiative? Is this the Rust initiative?
No, it's again, these are like smart things to be talking about, right? These are, and I think it's just showing through that there are knowledgeable folks on the scene here who are contributing to these policies, to these strategies, and showing up with not just good ideas, modern ideas. I think some of these are, very contemporary, even thinking ahead in a helpful way. But I thought it was great to see the explicit recognition of the open source community as a party that the U.S. government needs to learn how to engage productively with. And it's continuing, right? Even beyond the news of the national cybersecurity strategy, which was a couple of weeks ago. Even more recently, we had the reemergence in the U.S. Senate of the Securing Open Source Software Act that was around last congressional session. It's back. It passed committee. I think it was just last week. So these issues are front and center, and I'm glad to see that the role of open source creators in all of this is not being overlooked. And also, we're not asking, I think it's the policy is protecting these open source maintainers' interests in a helpful way. And it's setting the stage for the rest of us to figure out what are some of these practices that we can design and employ to align the incentives of open source users with open source creators. I just think that's super important.
The only thing that could make this better is if maybe we had some more technologically literate folks in the House and the Senate. But it's progress for sure.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there.
I'm glad I'm not on the TikTok hearing episode.
Oh my God.
No thanks.
That was painful to watch. Yeah. All right, Donald, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. This has been super, super useful, I think.
This was a delight. And if anybody's interested in learning more of our perspective, especially around open source issues arising from the national cybersecurity strategy or these other efforts, we have a kind of helpful section, I think, on the Tidelift homepage. We call it our Open Source Cybersecurity Resource Center. So head over there and we'll help kind of piece together how do these executive orders relate to the OMB orders, to the cybersecurity strategy. We've done our best to highlight how those all connect and how they relate specifically for application development teams building with open source and for maintainers and creators building open source.
And we've got some great links to some Tidelift blog posts that are also in the show notes. And before you dig into all that, order yourself some tacos, guac, and salsa.
Love it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks
we'll be
again
right back.
Let me join.
Absolutely. We'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news. Do the words free time or relaxation sound foreign to you? Perhaps you've been stuck in the office too long, battling cyber threats or worrying about the next strain of ransomware. Let Sophos help provide peace of mind 24/7, 365 with cybersecurity delivered as a service. Because we want you to get back to your weekends, family dinners, and everything in between. And you'll get there with Sophos. Visit securityweekly.com/Sophos to learn more.
Business Security Weekly is recorded on Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Each week, we address the challenges facing CISOs through our guest interviews, including former and active CISOs. Our news segment is focused on leadership and communication to better help security leaders translate and communicate security risks into business risks. Jason Albuquerque, Ben Carr, Tyler Robinson, and others add their expertise to the conversation. I'm Matt Alderman, and I hope you search for Business Security Weekly in your favorite podcast catcher and subscribe to download our latest content.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Enough of Matt Alderman. Let's get to the news. But first, an announcement. As a member of the Security Weekly community, we are pleased to offer you 20% off your InfoSec World 2023 tickets. Join a community of over 2,000 security professionals and innovators at InfoSec World on September 25th through 27th at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort. Experience world-class learning and networking through enlightening keynotes, informative panel discussions, interactive breakout sessions, hands-on workshops, and more. Register today at securityweekly.com/InfoSec World 2023 using code ISW23-SecWeek20. All right, now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news. You can check out securityweekly.com/ESW312 if you want to follow along as we go through the news. All right. Where's my co-host? Where are they at? There we go. Hi, guys. We're gonna, for folks watching today's episode, we're gonna try showing all of us all the time for the news segment here. All right, so we got some funding here, pretty good amount of Series A, Series B, Series C funding here. We got 10 fundings up here. We got CrowdStrike. What do they call it? CrowdStrike Ventures. CrowdStrike Falcon Fund.
Yeah, it's their corporate venture capital arm, pretty much.
Yeah, and I mean, what I always wonder when I see these is this basically an intent to acquire? I think when we see these things, when we see like Salesforce Ventures or Cisco Ventures investing in companies, like how much of a signal is that hey, we want an option to buy at some point?
Not as much as you would think. So yes, they're going to invest in theses that make sense and companies that make sense for their greater vision of Cisco or CrowdStrike or whatever the investing arm is working under. So they're going to look for certain investment theses that fit. And basically what they're looking for is optionality and to stay close to the founders. And so it's the ability to remain, to have the option to acquire at some point. There's generally not always a requirement or commitment that they're going to acquire. It's just more of a, hey, we want to be involved. Here's a little bit of capital to show that we're serious. There's skin in the game. Obviously, they're looking for a return on that capital, right? They're not giving that away as an investment just to have optionality. But that is definitely one of the key things they're looking for, is to stay close to the firm because it fits a thesis for the longer term vision of the bigger company.
And the other interesting aspect here is this is a technology integration as well. In a lot of these cases, it's not just money changing hands, but they're doing joint sales stuff and marketing stuff together. They're integrating their products together. So it seems like I don't know. I think that's interesting. Is that a good thing generally? Like with money changing hands and technology integration, does that just say that they're really going all in?
Yeah, it means they're committed. They're committed to the move. They're committed to the direction of the market. They're committed to that partner. And you got to understand, most of the time, these strategic investments. Now, CrowdStrike Ventures is might be different. I don't know specifically, but I've done a number of these deals with other companies in the past, and they're basically $1 million, $2 million, right? we're not talking about a $10 or $20 million investment in a Series A or anything like that. They're usually a very small percentage of the overall round.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and there's a few. So the trend of not knowing the deal size on some of these is kind of continuing. There's a few things where we see and this is one of the cases where Abnormal Security's last raise was a $210 million Series C in May 2022, and this is just a venture round.
Very open to interpretation.
But that would sort of, it would go along with what you were saying about it, Tyler, right? Like, this isn't necessarily intended to be some sort of huge round to completely and utterly revolutionize the company. It's just, hey, confidence in your product. Hey, like where it's going. Maybe we have some influence. Maybe we don't. Maybe down the road we do some acquisition. Maybe we don't. But this is just, so even if it is $1 million or 10 million or something, just a small thing, you don't necessarily want to say, our company isn't doing well, because people will automatically assume if it's a down round, there's something amiss. And this isn't the case with this kind of thing.
Yeah, I doubt that this is a down round. It's probably a consistent extension round or a minor up round. I mean, at the end of the day, it always depends on how good the company's doing. How good is Abnormal doing? How much have they grown since the last round? Have they grown into that round? Was the last round overinflated? We don't know. There's no way to know. My gut tells me that Katie's probably spot on here, and this is just a situation where Abnormal Security probably took in $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, something in that range, just to be closer to CrowdStrike.
Yeah, and we've got another weird one in here. I think story number 4, Stravacity, I guess is how you would say that. That's a Series A2.
A2, that's a new term.
Very often. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess kind of like an extension to the A2. Somebody described it to me as implies new capital was infused at the same valuation as the last round.
That's right. Yeah, it's just what you'll hear it often referred to at the seed stage. You'll often hear it as a seed extension. I've never really heard A2, but it's the same concept. That's just an extension where we've reopened the round, taking in more funding at that same exact price.
Right. So just adding to the existing cap table without yeah. Yep. And interesting.
When I opened this story, I thought it was a Gap ad at first.
Yeah. The image. Yeah, it does. It does. I love the images. That's honestly, I don't think I've mentioned this before, but I love the team images. It's always interesting to see how they decide to do that, because sometimes it's just the founders. Like we had one a good number of shows ago, maybe a dozen shows ago, where it really looked like a fashion ad. Like these guys were wearing sunglasses and they, these snazzy suits and sneakers and stuff like that. It really looked like a fashion ad. But yeah, I love that.
Yeah, there's some good-looking dudes over there at Stravacity. Co-founders Keith and Steven.
I did. I really thought it was a Gap ad. So,
their smiles are so good. Their smiles are.
They're just having a good time with the photo shoot. They're just having a good time. Just happy guys.
So Stravacity
they just raised $20 million.
It's a cloud-native customer identity and access management, a CIAM vendor for the Fortune 1000. Yet another 4-letter acronym.
I know.
Does anyone know how to pronounce it?
No.
CIAM? I don't know. We should ask Forrester. They did a wave on customer identity and access management Q4 2022. So it's their term, or likely their term.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I wonder if this is. I've also seen an identity posture management category. So I wonder if it's basically the same thing, just different acronyms. But I've seen a lot of the SaaS identity stuff now where it fits somewhere in between an IDP and an SSPM, I guess. I don't fully understand that.
There's so much overlap. If you were to Venn diagram all these, man, you would have no spots where anything is solo. Everything is over, Venn diagrammed over at least 2 or 3 things these days. It's kind of crazy, but the new investment brings Stravacity's total funding to $28 million. Good for them. Hopefully they're off and running. I mean, you're not going to get an additional round of funding at presumably, because it's an A2, presumably a even the same rate anymore as having done it before, right? You're going to take a down round. So good for them if it is a consistent fly round.
Yeah, so creating surprisingly simple customer sign-in journeys is the messaging that they're using here. Interesting. Okay. So there were 2 that I found really surprising here. 2 that names that I remembered from the old days. Actually, 3 if you count SCADAfence. But Votiro, SCADAfence, and Hypori are 3 companies that I followed back in like my early analyst days. And here they are raising like Series B for Hypori, Series A for Votiro. Like, did they just clear the cap tables and start over from scratch? What is going on here?
Wow, really that long? I mean, you're really old. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, Series A Hypori is 2021, but this company's been around since. Oh, they're saying founded 2021. They were not founded 2021, unless they just have the same name.
You're just getting old, and your brain is starting to get scrambled, Adrian.
I am not. I will not concede that. Well, see here, Votiro at least founded 2010. Votiro was founded in 2010. Votiro
2010. So they're raising an $11.5 million Series A 12 years later?
Yeah, and they're still doing the same thing. They're basically cleaning up files. So what they do is they just like recreate a PDF or something like that in an effort to strip out any malicious macros in a spreadsheet or something like that. They do document sanitization is what they used to call it. File sanitization.
12-year-old company raising their Series A. So that indicates one of 2 things. Either hyper successful and never had to raise and just have been consistently growing in a very, very healthy way, or flush the cap table and start over. My gut tells me they've probably just been consistent. They probably have not fallen to the overfunding train and has done a good job and a healthy job of building the company in a way that makes good business sense regardless of the funding atmosphere of the last decade.
I mean, I guess if they had like a really good partner program, like sanitizing files is something you could sell to everybody if it's the right price, if it's cheap enough, right? Like Proofpoint, like all the email security vendors, maybe some of the cloud vendors, just cleaning up files with malicious stuff in them.
They do. If you go to their website, they do have a really good partner ecosystem. Okay. So that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Hypori, I'm a little bit more confused about, because the Hypori I remember was like you could have a virtual work instance on your phone. So you could have an iPhone and basically you would remote into a virtual Android instance running in the cloud somewhere. And the idea was if anything malicious happened on that you had the separation between the data on your personal device. So you'd have your personal data, your work data. And we saw a bunch of mobile MDM companies. Google bought one. I think BlackBerry bought one that tried to have different enclaves on the same smartphone, right? And Hypori was, they called it virtualization, but it was basically...
it can't be the same company, Adrian.
It
desktop
is.
As a service.
I think it is. Look on their website. The first thing, 100% separation of enterprise and personal data. They added zero trust architecture. Secure access
truly
to
secure
public,
BYOD.
private cloud. Yeah.
That's great.
And I don't know why they're saying they're founded in 2021, because I was covering them back in 2014.
Huh. Good question. Maybe they flushed the cap table, refounded the company. Who knows?
I guess so. Perhaps. All right. Yeah, that was it was a bit weird seeing that. It was some deja vu in the funding stuff here. And SCADAfence has been sorry, go ahead.
The fact that we even can remember companies from that long ago, Adrian, is a bad sign, my friend. Like, yeah, I remember when BlackBerry was the hotness. Like, come on, man. The gray hairs are showing. And now we're in 3-up mode, so everybody can see mine. So.
Well, but that's also the first thing to go is the short-term memory. So.
That explains a lot.
True. Yeah. So this is interesting. Yeah. So I don't know what's going on with SCADAfence, but their Series A was 2017. Their Series B was 2021, and then this is another venture round, just described as a venture round.
But again, you'll see it's Fujitsu and Mitsubishi Electric as new investors, so it's probably just another one of those corporate venture capital rounds where it's a few million each, and they're just taking it in to get the strategic partnership locked in.
Yeah. All right. Anything else here look interesting to you guys before we move past the fundings?
Did you happen to take any time to look at C data by chance? Like into the number 10, 11. Actually, I'm jumping past fundings. Are there any fundings that you want to go through first?
The only other one I was going to mention was Push Security, which is kind of like a PLG approach to a competitor with a company that I work for, with Valence. It's basically like you can go create an account, and it's go look at all your SaaS stuff, let you know about your integrations, and you can just go open an account and do it. So it's pretty simple and straightforward. Doesn't have a ton of features, but I love products where I can just go in and play around with them, where I don't have to have a minimum of 100 users or something like that just to test out the product and see what it's about.
So I'm going to ask you point blank, because we all know my predilections to what I think about PLG and product-led growth. Do you think that actually turns into a business? Like, if Adrian or insert random Joe person, one person here, can get in and use your technology the way Push is designed to allow a single human being to get on there, do you think it results in an actual increase in business, or are we approaching the go-to-market, or are they approaching the go-to-market incorrectly there?
I don't know what their exit strategy is, but I see this being like an ideal Barracuda or Sophos exit here. Somebody who serves the mid-market, and I don't know if they've got a good channel program. I could see it working, but yeah, you need a lot of people to sign up, to start making money off this approach.
Then there's just not enough cyber people on the planet. The reason why PLG works for developers is because there's 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1 when you compare them to quantity of cyber people. When we're talking about cyber people, it's just not enough. You could get all of them. It's probably still not enough. But my follow-on question that I have, because you may know this market, you do know this market way better than I do, isn't this concept of SaaS security? I think that's what they're doing here, Push Security. I haven't done a deep dive on them. But the concept of SaaS security, isn't it just really about where you're collecting the data from? Isn't that the fundamental difference? So some SaaS security vendors I know collect the data via connecting into your Gmail, so that anytime any of your users sign up for a SaaS service, they see the email confirmation, and they now know you're on a SaaS service. Others work in a CASB or reverse proxy mode model to look at data outbound. Is that the fundamental difference between SaaS style vendors, is how they collect the data? I believe that the majority of them are able to do similar capabilities with regards to integrations and configurations and things like that. But it seems like the data collection point is the big differentiation.
No, I don't think that's the only big. It's just a well-known use case. Discovering, doing the discovery piece. That's where CASB started. Is they would you'd shove your firewall logs or proxy logs into them, or they'd have an agent, that or a browser extension or something like that, and that's how you discover what stuff, where your employees are shoving data, that they signed up for Evernote or Notion or whatever, and they're putting stuff in there. But yeah, discovery is just one use case. And, so a lot of the other SSPM is more focused on, hey, let's, instead of starting with discovery, let's start with your main Office 365 or Google Workspace and work out from there. Start with the stuff that is managed, that you do know about. And there's all kinds of stuff you're not aware of that's happening. Like, I'm building a report right now, and it's like an average of, I want to say, like 49 files shared per employee across everything. Wow. And it's a lot higher at some companies, because what people do is they'll say share with anybody with the link, and you only need to share it once. Like there should be an option where that's only open for 24 hours, right? Or only until the first time it's accessed, and then you close it back down. All those stay open. So some of the research we've done, we found, I think the average is 90% of data shared is completely idle, has been idle for the last 90 days. Like literally it's share once, leave open forever, and completely forget about it. So that's kind of another, and you're looking at not just data shares, but identities, configurations. Does everybody have MFA enabled?
But now you're getting beyond just SaaS security, and you're really starting to get into SaaS configuration, and you're getting into cloud configuration. And again, here's where the Venn diagram starts to overlap with other 4-letter acronyms.
Well, yeah, I mean, all these products, all these security products, especially the posture management ones, go back to visibility. The fact that you don't know that you've got 1 million open shares, right? Like that's a problem. You need some visibility on that. And you need to know that 98% of them, you could close them right now. And that's kind of our sweet spot, is we can automatically close, 990,000 of those things. And no employee's even going to notice, because nobody's touched those for over 3 months.
Right.
So yeah, just kind of, going through and organizing and cleaning up all that stuff is I think the big use case for SaaS security that here. Threat detection is also an interesting one. Like, we talked about in an earlier segment, like there's this one adversary, I forget the name of the adversary, that goes after Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace admin accounts. And then they do business email compromise from the inside out. So basically, they make themselves look like an internal employee, and that's how they hit you with the business email compromise, because they're basically a super admin in Google terms, or I forget what Microsoft calls the equivalent of a super admin. But yeah, so when somebody gets that, or if somebody steals your Slack OAuth token and logs in from a different country or something like that, like there's a big use case for threat detection there.
Gotcha. I knew you'd know what you were talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff, because that's where the whole business has gone, right? Like all your emails and files are in these applications, and you got little to no visibility on what's going on with them.
And so that, my friends, is why he's the #1 host on this show.
This you threw me a softball. I'm working in this market right now. But thank you. You asked about CData. Let's jump over to CData now.
The reason why I asked about CData and wondered if you dove into them at all is, as a investor, I hear rumblings well before things come out of stealth and well before things get funded and things like that. And I've been hearing about CData for 6 months. As you got to check out CData. Have you talked to? You got it. Literally, like everybody I talked to is, have you talked to CData yet? And I was curious if you had the chance to dig into what they do.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, Ativo, Thinkst, right? This market. Yeah. So what looks different here, and there's only so much I can tell from the website, I would love to get a briefing or a demo on this, is like one of the big points of friction is, okay, where am I going to put my honeypots? Where am I going to put my honey tokens? And generally that's a manual thing, or one of the things I did when I was at Thinkst is I put together scripts that would help you automate placing these tokens. Like you could put every laptop would get a fake Word document, basically. And if somebody opened that Word document, you would know that they have access to that machine. And you could write a script to do that. So it looks like the main differentiator here is that's part of the product. Like they're going to automatically generate and place those for you, so you don't have that mental friction of having to lay out a plan and decide, okay, where am I going to put these things? Because it's a little bit, and I'd love to see how they're doing it, because I don't see a whole lot of details on how they're doing it.
Yeah, so I can't really talk about how they're doing it with regards to CData, but a good friend of mine runs a company called Deception Logic, which is in that same market. And I talked to him specifically about CData early on, and he was telling me exactly how he deploys, not how CData does, but how he deploys automating those kind of cloud-based, data-based, content-based tokens throughout everything you do. And he's got it down to a science where you can single-click deploy into just about any type of environment and have those canaries, if you want to call them canaries, like Thinkist does, but have those canaries in the coal mine kind of report back quickly. And I think the key thing to the reinvention of this market is not new. It's been around 7 or 8 years minimum, right, that I've known about this space. But the key
about
thing
10 years.
Finally, the key thing to this finally being successful is automation and ease of use. And finding ways so that users don't have to do anything, admins, security people don't have to do anything, and it just automatically flicks and based off of usage, based off of context, based off of what your environment looks like, what you've connected to, it just flicks the canary tokens into the correct spot. And I don't want to use that term generically because that is a Thinkist term, but
right. Honey tokens is the generic
the honey
version.
tokens, whatever you want to call them, into the correct spots in an automated way, and then pulls them down, moves them around, and kind of keeps it in a continually refreshing model. That is the reinvention that's occurring in this market, right? The automation, and really that comes from the fact that our infrastructure 5, 7, 8 years ago switched from being generic infrastructure to API-derived infrastructure. And now that everything is API-derived and API accessible, we can do these automations, and that might reinvigorate this market.
Right. Yeah, and it's I didn't know. So all of a sudden, I didn't know about deception logic either. But yeah, all of a sudden, like a market that's it's pretty late for this market, right? Like most of it's been acquired or has exited in some way. There were a couple exits that were not positive exits in this market because they and it all came back to friction. Like using deception for detection is a no-brainer if it doesn't take you a ton of labor to do it. So that was always the key at Thinkst is, 5 minutes you could have one of those things up and running, but you still did have the friction of having to decide, okay, what profile am I going to use? Where am I going to put it on the network? Right. And I imagine you've got to with this too, which is why I want to learn more about this. Like there still has to be some, they're just not going to throw them everywhere because you still have the balance of, I don't want employees to trip on these things and set off alarms, right? Like I only want the bad guys to do it. So there's some strategy you have to get into. Yeah.
So I would make the argument that we are in a world now from a cybersecurity perspective where context is everything, right? When we're doing an incident response handling, right? An incident occurs. What do the SOC people do? Well, they have to go look at the context around all of the things in your environment, the content, the logs, the activities, whatever, the new accounts, all that is context, right? And I think we're just now getting to the point, and like if you really want to future tech this, we could talk about AI overlays on context too. But I think the reality is we're just getting to the point where cybersecurity has a breadth of context, again, derived from the fact that we have so much API access to everything we do now that the context became accessible. And now we can load that context into a data lake and have that data lake analyzed. When we talk about that context, we can use the context to make smart decisions on where we put the tokens. Okay, so this whole segment of our box deployment or our data store or whatever hasn't been touched in 90 days. So let's stick a token there, because if anything touches it, That's an alert. It's an issue. But this one's super active by all of our users. Let's not token that for now, right? So like you can use the context to even make smarter decisions on token deployment.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and tokens I think are really the most interesting place here. Like more and more we're moving away from IaaS and running infrastructure and things like that. So it's less about the honeypots and more about the, as we use more and more SaaS, there's the opportunity to use more and more tokens there. And
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Exciting company, exciting market. And I cannot believe I'm saying this because literally I've had investment opportunities for 7 years in this space and I've passed on all of them because I just haven't been excited by the market. But I think this is the reinvention that needs to occur.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, they still don't have credit card honey tokens though. That's pretty cool that Thinks did that.
Yeah, that's very cool. That was a really genius idea.
Fake Amex cards. I love it.
Brilliant.
But I mean, that's why I love this market in general is there's so much room for creativity, and just the idea of setting traps for attackers just makes defense more fun to do.
Yep.
Let's see. Katie, what anything grabbed your attention in the news this week? We can go anywhere from this point.
Mute. Yeah. You know what the best part about this was? I said mute, and for those of you that aren't watching on video, Katie gave that, oh my God, I'm muted face, which you guys don't generally get to see when that occurs. So that made me smile.
That's the
well,
best
I
part.
coughed a few minutes ago, so I muted myself so I didn't interrupt you.
Yeah.
But
I've been
as
there.
I was
We've all
saying,
been there.
while on mute, I thought Andy Ellis's little blurb there, it's not really an article per se, but he tees up an Orca post, and he does it in the vein of the Passover holiday, which is happening, and he always has a way of laying things out there, which is just like really straightforward. And like, come on, let's get behind what we know we have to do. So I was reading that before we started today and had fun with that. But it's not as much of an op-ed piece or a funding piece. It was just a fun little quick read.
You want to describe it?
Sure. So Orca Security put out a blog post on tracing cloud security issues back to code origins, and Andy commented on what the to-dos and the not to-dos and using the Passover holiday, which is one of the major Jewish holidays, the 10 plagues of cloud security, looking through the things that we've all been talking about: alert fatigue, data sprawl, siloed tools, neglected assets, organizational friction, unmanaged APIs, context-free alerts. In other words, alerts you don't know what the hell to do with. Jews don't believe in hell, so there was my little.
Tyler was just talking about context. Yeah.
Overbroad entitlements, unclear ownership, and security-triggered outages. So, these are things that we've been talking about for years and years and years, but wrapping them up in this nice little package. It was a fun little read. It takes a minute.
Yeah, I like
it's interesting to me, like, what I liked about this, sure, whatever the Passover hooks, the funny little quips, sure. Andy's good at all of that, right? He's entertaining, if not educational. But the key thing about the 10 plagues that I thought was interesting is it's not the traditional garbage we tend to see. App vulns, network vulns, vuln management,
right.
Blah, 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 blah. Like the same garbage we've seen for a decade. Literally, I feel like the 10 plagues that he's putting in here that Katie just kind of ran down the bulk of really is the right way going forward to kind of think of how cybersecurity can get better. So where we've traditionally said, how can we innovate in network security, or how can we innovate in AppSec? How can we innovate in vuln management? How can we innovate in getting rid of alert fatigue? How can we innovate in getting rid of neglected assets? Now, notice it's just a different way of thinking the same thing, but more kind of focused on the true pain point that the buyer and the CISO has. So that's what I thought was really cool about this post is the 10 things he put on there are just really cool, really modern and unique way of looking at cyber.
Yeah, and really, if you just take everything he wrote and say, all right, what are the 10 plagues? Alert fatigue. All right, take the photo negative of that. How do we get rid of alert fatigue? What's the process? What are the tools we use? Awesome. Who's involved? Where is it involved? Data sprawl. Again, what do we have now? How do we use it? I mean, I think the answer to Andy's question specifically would be Orca. But if you look at it from a systemic point of view, it's everything. It's the people, it's the process, it's the technology, and just taking.
Yeah, Orca can't solve all of this. If Orca can solve all of this, they need to be worth $10 billion today.
Of course. No, there is no silver bullet for any of these, but
that's close to what their valuation is. Yeah, I mean it's up there.
I said they really need to be worth $10 billion today, not $10 billion on paper and really worth like $400 million or whatever they're supposed to be.
Yeah, it's I liked a lot of this too. Like I'm hearing more and more that alert fatigue is table stakes. Like CISOs don't want to buy another tool that's going to pump out tens of thousands more alerts for their teams. That's just conversation's not going to go any further as soon as they look at the demo and they see 250,000 critical alerts. And the one that was really interesting to me was the overbroad entitlements, because now that I'm working for an SSPM, that's a huge thing in SaaS. Like the concept that you have all these IT admins who are on the business side. They're not in IT at all, but somehow they've got access over all your data in Notion, all your data in Google maybe, and they're creating accounts for people. Maybe it's somebody in HR who's doing this stuff. It's and maybe in those cases it's not overbroad entitlements, but they need to be talking with security and with IT. Like there needs to be some collaboration there, because they all of a sudden own email for the company, or they own a big chunk of your data and the app that's managing your data and how it's configured.
And the interesting thing about this list is, you can look at this and you can say, all right, there are so many dependencies, even within just these 10, these 10 quote plagues, there are dependencies within them. And so it's not, none of these, just like he writes, siloed tools is a plague. These aren't siloed processes to master. It's all interconnected. Mm-hmm. I think the real fun of this would be trying to map which of these is the locusts, which is frogs, which are slain with the firstborn.
That would have taken some more time, but that would have been, you're right, that would have been more fun.
Come on, Andy, hold up your end of the bargain. Let's go.
Yeah, and I mean, to both your points, it's kind of like the fundamentals are shifting. And some of the old stuff that we think of as the basics and the fundamentals, some of those maybe should be replaced. Maybe managing, doing API discovery and API security should be one of those base, CIS top 18.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it's time to shift around some of the old what we consider the basics.
For sure. APIs, configuration management, those are topics that are top of mind for every company.
Yeah. The next one that has a fun clickbait title with a number in it is one of my favorite writers, Kelly Shortridge, has, and this is very much in the vein of chaos and the stuff that she's been closely working on for a while, resilience, things like that, is just the idea of coming up with ways that things could go wrong and trying to anticipate those. So the title of the article is 69 Ways to F Up Your Deploy. And it's about just going through and breaking this stuff yourself so that you're prepared for anything later on, is kind of the general concept of chaos engineering.
Yeah, bring your pillow. This sucker reads longer than Gone with the Wind.
Yeah. But I mean, it's still a fun read, though. There's memes in there. All of her stuff is delightful to read. It's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, and it's definitely entertaining. But it's not a sit and read in 4 minute.
It is 69 items.
Hey, I'm going to read this like a book for a week.
Yeah, and it's broken down into what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 categories of types. I guess ways that your deploys can break.
And she has 13 references at the bottom. Like she even did her citations.
She loves the footnotes.
Like, badass, totally badass.
Yep.
Gotta have those citations.
Nah, I just plagiarize everybody. It's easier.
I was once in my first year of college. I was accused by a professor of plagiarizing, but he didn't check my endnotes.
And everything was in there? You were on the up and up, KT?
Of course it was in there.
I just used
But he gave me a B on the paper because he said I was plagiarizing. I'm like, first of all, if I was plagiarizing, I shouldn't get a B. But secondly, like, check your last page.
You gave me a B and you said I plagiarized? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Now I just use ChatGPT and can claim stupidity. Hey, ChatGPT plagiarized it. I didn't.
I don't think Samsung's going to be able to do that.
Let's go to that project. Let's talk about that one. Good transition.
So I think there's been some bad takes in the press here, and generally there's been some misunderstanding of how AI works. So absolutely, AI, large language tools like ChatGPT need a lot of human input to help with alignment, to help with fine tuning, to fix things. That's why when you go into ChatGPT, you get the little thumbs up, thumbs down, and if you click one of those, it'll ask you for more details, like why did you like this response? Why did you dislike this response? And they're using that to help make it better. But people seem to think that anything you throw into the prompt is going into the training model, and somebody can somehow magically pull it back out verbatim. Like if I type in my password, somebody can say, what's Adrian's password? And it's just going to hand it off. And that's just not how it works. So I did some digging here and found that if you use ChatGPT's consumer interface, either for free or the ChatGPT Plus, which is $20 a month. So that's if you're going to chat.openai.com and using that interface, you are opted in for them to do whatever with your prompts. So whatever data you're feeding it, they're going to use it to understand how to make the product better. They're not necessarily going to put it into a training model or into a fine-tuning model or anything like that. But yeah, consider it, think before you put stuff in there. But there is a form to opt out. And it's just a janky Google form, but there is a form where you can say, don't use my data. Much like you do with other services that ask, hey, can we collect your crash data and send it back for improving our service? So not that controversial. And then, one step better on the API interface, since that's more businesses and services that are using the API, their default opt out. And there's a form you can fill out if you want to opt in and let them train off your data. But I like that they opt out on the API interface by default.
Yeah, this is going to be a problem. This whole opt-in, opt-out, learning large language modules and self-learning is going to be a massive problem over time, right? Because if these systems get a hold of large troves of data, back to your point from 30 minutes ago about 90% of data being open on the internet, if you know the link, like if it can get a hold of that stuff, it can train on it, it can learn on it, and it's going to have it in the database, whether you've opted in or out. Like, this is going to continue to be a massive problem as AI becomes the dominant form of how we work every day. And I know I sound like some kind of future tech weirdo, but I fully believe that AI overtakes a huge portion of what we do every day. I'm already massively working it into my daily workflows for everything I do. And I like with the launch of Microsoft Copilot last week, I don't know if you guys have seen the Copilot videos, but this stuff's amazing. Like, it's going to be the way that we do cyber. You're going to bring up your Microsoft Copilot or what your OpenAI Security Pilot or whatever the company that monetizes it is, and you're just going to say, show me my list of vulnerabilities for today. Prioritize these based off these 5 criteria. Help me fix them. Please fix this one. Like, literally, that is going to become the interactive model for how we operate day to day in cyber. It's a matter of when, not if. And I think the privacy concerns of the data collection aspect of it is super, super important to lock down. It's very, very scary.
Well, I think we should back up maybe a second for those who are listening and either can't or haven't yet seen the notes, and talk about why we're talking about this.
Yeah, I jump right to the end. That's where I live. You go ahead and talk about the boring stuff.
You're one of those people who watches the last 5 minutes of the movie and then you're done. So unfortunately, and I'm sure Samsung is not the only company. I'm sure there have been many, many others that aren't in the news. Samsung, some of their private information, their intellectual property, they were using, some of the team members, some of the employees were using ChatGPT, not quite understanding what the back end looked like, not quite understanding what Adrian was talking about, where there is an opt-in for training data model and an opt-out under OpenAPI. And so things like meeting notes, new source code, and other proprietary information that should have been kept private wasn't. I'm sure it wasn't malicious. Either way, it's a form of a data leak for them. And probably a lot of people like Tyler are pretty psyched about this whole idea of being able to use AI and automation in their daily workflow, and they're forging ahead but not thinking about the implications of what does that mean. Trading data is usually anonymized, so that de-risks a tiny bit, but for a lot of companies, they don't want any of that out there. What if somebody can somehow decipher? Because when there's data, people can look at it, they can find. So if there's a will, there's a way, right? So Samsung had a big issue with this, and probably other companies too. And it's just a word of warning to be careful, to check your terms and conditions, to check what's happening. Don't just click that accept all. When the cookies pop up for years and years, most people just click accept all. You don't have to do that. And in the case of ChatGPT and the Open API, you don't have to opt in to training data. Does it make the model better? Of course it does. Does it keep you as private and secure? No, unfortunately it doesn't. That's one of the downsides. Hi, Tyler.
Well, I don't even think this is going into the model. And this is the bit I'm pushing back on, is calling this a data leak is a bit of a stretch. It's like calling it a data leak because they uploaded that same data to OneDrive, right? Like, it's a SaaS service that they're using. Like, there's no expectation that unless OpenAI has another bug like they had with the Redis database and some of the prompt data got leaked between different customers, there's no reasonable expectation that this data is going to somehow become available in the model. So like these articles are saying things like, oh, now the data is in the wild. No, it's not. A malicious insider at OpenAI can access it, but it's not in the wild.
This example is a little inflammatory, but I think the message really for people to take away is to just read the small print, and also to consider what your company's strategy is. Yeah, and so it's more of your business. It's your business decision. It's your IP. You get to decide what to do with it. If you're at the decision maker level, roll that out. My company did. They rolled out a formal policy a few weeks ago and said, here's what you can do, here's what you can't do.
Exactly. So yeah, governance around how you onboard SaaS. What are you allowed to do with the SaaS? What kind of data are you allowed to plug in there as prompts? What use cases are you allowed to use it for? That's all stuff that we all need to be thinking about now, because whether you're aware of it or not, your employees are probably using it. And yeah, you would have to understand the use cases that, it's really good at optimizing code and writing code and stuff like that. So of course people are going to be throwing proprietary code in there. Let's see what else we have here. So number 14, I thought was interesting. This is from a ways back, an older thread from January, but Clint Gibler, who runs the TLDR newsletter, really great guy, interesting dude, and cool newsletter. If you're not currently checking that out, it's definitely worth subscribing to.
It's a top newsletter. It's the top 3 newsletter in cyber. So if you haven't checked it out, please go check it out. It's absolutely amazing.
Also worth mentioning, like a lot of what's in the news today, including this one, did come from the security funded newsletter. So just a quick shout out on that one also, because I beg, borrow, and steal a lot from that newsletter.
Yep.
So thanks to Mike Privette for that. But yeah, this is just a list of companies who have done large scale YubiKey WebAuthn rollouts. And in the TLDR here is it's not as easy as you might think. You know, there are some tricky things about doing this. You know, anything from just physically getting the security key to all your employees globally to actually getting them to use it and figuring out like to what extent are you going to use it. And one of the things I found really interesting reading through some of these is that a lot of folks are just using the security key once. And once they use the YubiKey, from then on, they're just using Touch ID or Face ID from that point on. You know, they're not requiring employees to use the YubiKey every time they authenticate. They're letting them use the system authenticator.
You know why?
Because it's easier. Friction, yeah.
Identification, authentication, authorization will always fail or succeed based on level of friction. That's it. And actually, you can even extend that thesis to most cybersecurity will fail or succeed based on friction. But 100%, that one is so friction dependent. You have to have the frictionless solution.
Definitely easier to lose a YubiKey Nano than it is your fingerprint or your face.
Absolutely.
If you're losing your fingerprint or your face, you got bigger problems.
Precisely.
Exactly.
Well put, Katie.
Although I did once actually cut my finger cleaning, unloading the dishwasher, and it really mucked up my authentication for almost a month. I couldn't. This was a few years ago, and I had a thumbprint. And I couldn't use the thumbprint reader.
I'll always enroll more than one on each hand. Like I always do, like either both index fingers or both thumbs.
So
yes, that was a hard lesson to learn.
Funny story. I do both fingers and thumbs as well for the same reason. I do all of these, right? And for those that aren't looking, it's index and middle finger and thumbs on both hands are registered. But funny story. I was working as a cybersecurity consultant. Probably 10, 15 years ago. And one of my fellow consultants called into work sick. And the reason he called into work sick was because he had injured a finger, broken a finger, and couldn't remember what his password was without just typing it. But he had broken a finger and couldn't authenticate because he couldn't remember what his password was.
Oh, that's crazy.
Without actively typing it.
No, but why did he call in sick? I don't understand that part.
Because he couldn't authenticate to log into work. He couldn't get into his computer to work. He couldn't authenticate. He couldn't type his password. His fingers were broken.
No, I get that, but why did he have to call in sick? Why couldn't he have just called IT and...
Because he was a crappy employee. I don't know. That's what he did. I'm just saying it's a funny story, Katie. Come on. You're killing me.
I don't get it. Like, I don't get why he couldn't have just called IT and been like, all right, I don't remember.
I don't know.
Yeah, reset my password, right?
Actually, it's what he ended up doing. I just think it took like a half a day to get it done or whatever. But
yeah, I mean, mine's always going to be in my my password database on my phone. So yeah, it's I don't know, it's a pretty shit reason, but it's a funny one. I love the story. It's a good story.
I mean, it's a good story.
You liked it. You got it. Katie, on the other hand, whatever.
No, I just don't understand why you had to call in sick.
Katie, stop. You're being pedantic. Stop.
Actually,
So
behind the scenes, Sam has a really good answer for that, but we'll just leave it at that. We love our production crew.
Adrian, get control of this shenanigans. Where are we going?
We are going to another newsletter that might be worth your time checking out. Only 2 of them so far, but Jason Haddix, who a lot of people know him from his time at Bug Crowd. He's done a lot of speaking work. He's done a lot of helped out a lot of folks getting into the industry, written up a lot of good stuff in that. He now has a newsletter called Executive Offense, which is a great name. And yeah, pretty good. The subtitle here is The Old and New Buckets Ransomware FIDO2 Chat Ops. Oh, maybe that's just for this particular newsletter. But yeah, it's covering a variety of different things, everything from policy to cloud to hacking and stuff like that. And there's some good stuff in here. And correction, the thread from Clint Gibbler that we just went over did not come from Security Funded. It came from this one. Came from this newsletter.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I signed up for this the minute I saw it come live. Before he even posted his first post, I heard a rumor that he was putting one out there. I got onto Substack. I think it was Substack. Or Beehive. He's doing a Beehive. I got onto Beehive and instantly subscribed before he had even put out his first post. Definitely going to be a good content creator if he sticks with it.
Yeah. Let's see what else we've got here. Thought it was interesting so I don't know how I feel about this. So North Dakota is, the schools there are including, and it is statewide. So the governor signed a bill that's going to put cybersecurity into school, basically include it in the what's the term? Syllabus? Curriculum? Yeah, curriculum is the word I'm looking for.
Curriculum or syllabus work.
Yeah, my brain is I've apparently only got 10 minutes of brain power left for this podcast before it's just going to leak out my ears. It's been a long week. But yeah, I thought this was interesting because the thing, and I haven't looked at curriculums here in a while. My kids are teenagers; they've been through high school. But I would think, to me, the more important thing would be what they call digital citizenship, I think is the term that they use, which is more about just understanding the concepts of the internet, the fact that if you post something, it's publicly available, everybody can see it, assume it lives forever, learn how to use a search engine, how to find things online, being aware of trolling and bullying and just all the kinds of crap that you encounter online. I would hope that that's kind of a precursor to anything that's more cybersecurity related, or maybe even built into it. So yeah, I'd be interested to see how they're building this into these curriculums, how they're teaching it. And there's a lot of links here, that I'll probably dig into later. I didn't have a chance to dig into much of it yet. But yeah, that's North Dakota of all states. Apparently, is the first to sign a bill that puts both computer science and cybersecurity into school coursework from kindergarten through the 12th grade. Yeah,
that's fantastic. I fell in love with it myself as a passion in 7th grade even. I think I got my first modem in like 6th or 7th grade. But I mean, look, I just happened to have a passion for it and fell in love with it. I was not exposed to it in any formal way in high school. So the earlier we can get that exposure, I think the better.
Yeah, I don't even remember it being an option when I was in school. It might have been. I was so focused in other areas that it might have been an option, but it wasn't a mainstream option, for sure. I didn't even have a computer in undergrad. I went to a computer lab.
Yeah, we had computer labs and stuff like that, but that was the extent of it. I don't think any of it was even connected to the internet back in those days. Yeah, talking about showing our age. I've got another Daniel Meisler post here. AI revolutionizes InfoSec. So this post is mostly just him going through what are all the different use cases that he can think of that AI can be used for.
I highly recommend reading that post and reading the series of posts that Daniel has been putting out around AI and specifically AI and cyber. He's a super interesting dude. I had a conversation with him about how he's so prolific in his content creation. Like, it's constant. Mm-hmm. He's constantly cranking out more stuff. He doesn't watch TV. Like, I think he recently might have changed that. But back a couple of years ago when I asked him how he managed to get so much stuff done, he said, I don't do anything that's not this. Like, he just doesn't focus on any distractions. And so when it comes to deep dive in a tech topic like this, there's nobody better than him. And what I found is his output. I wanted to put out all the output that he put out about AI and cyber, and he's just ripped it. He just killed it. Yeah. I can't do anything because he's so far ahead of anybody else. He's really doing an amazing job.
And we're going to have him on as a guest. He's agreed to come on, and we're going to have an entire episode dedicated to just talking about AI, particularly the large language model AI and the impact it's going to have to the security space and to business in general. So we're going to have him on back to back with another gentleman who is the founder of a company who actually makes a product that builds these large language models off of your data internally in your company, which is something I didn't even realize was happening until, and it was just a PR person that suggested him to me. And I watched another podcast he was on, and I was like, holy crap, this is the stuff we were talking about happening in 6 months. And here it is. It's already happening.
I'm coming out of partial retirement for that one, for sure.
Yeah. So we'll have Tyler on those on that whole episode, hopefully.
Absolutely.
So one more essay here, number 21, from conflict to collaboration. So this is from Lenny Zeltzer, and co-worker of yours, Katie.
Yep.
And he's got a version both on dark reading and on his own website. The version on dark reading is just not loading for me. It's just a blank page. But maybe I should have used his link instead. There it goes. But yeah, I mean, the general idea, like I've heard this described as user-centric security and user-focused security, but the idea that, security shouldn't be working in isolation, that they should be, should be interacting with users more and collaborating on, how to implement policies and things like that. I mean, we've been talking about this for years, that security needs to understand the business, how it works, how these workflows work before just jumping into it and breaking shit, right? I mean, this is a path we've been on, long since the Department of No had to go away.
Really, what is cybersecurity without users? Jokingly, for years, I've always said cybersecurity would be a million times easier without having to deal with the stupid users at the other end of the food chain. But if you get rid of the users, there's no point in cybersecurity, right? They literally are the reason we do security.
Yeah. All right, and the squirrel story here. I don't know if you both got a chance to watch this video. True, complete non sequitur here. Has nothing to do with security or technology. Maybe somewhat with safety, like vehicle safety is pretty amazing these days. That this car and the person involved in this automotive accident was able to just get up and walk. Oh, you're watching it for the first time. We're watching Katie's.
Goodness, I think that's the benefit of the 3-up. Okay, that was really horrific.
We just got to see Katie's real-time response to that, and it was exactly what I would expect.
Yeah, that video is freaking epic. I have never seen a car go that high in the air in my life. Absolutely insane. And I really like kind of being able to play with the squirrels in 3-up mode while you're talking. Kind of cool.
Yeah, so for audio listeners, what's happening in this video is a Tesla with its cameras that can basically function as dash cams captured this. But this Kia Soul is alongside a pickup truck that has those, it's got a lift kit on it. It's got bigger wheels and tires, and the wheels and tires are spaced out. So I'm assuming like the bolts weren't long enough or the spacers failed. Something failed where the entire front driver's side tire comes off right in front of a Kia Soul. And the moment that rotating the rotational energy meets the front bumper of the Kia Soul, it throws the Kia Soul easily 6 to 8 feet up in the air, flips it on its back. Well, more than
that. It was probably 4 times the height of the car.
Yeah. Lands on the roof.
What's really funny about this, though, is it's a Kia Soul, and this is our squirrel story, right?
They were hamsters.
Isn't that the hamster car? Pretty close enough, right?
I think squirrels would be upset that you're calling them hamsters.
Small rodents. It's a small rodent story. Exactly.
Well, did Kia have some kind of campaign or commercial with hamsters in it?
You don't remember the dancing hamster?
You don't remember the dancing hamsters?
I haven't watched TV in 20
years.
LMFAO?
Like, I can even sing you the song if I wouldn't be so embarrassed to do it live.
Oh, come on. I got to do it.
I haven't watched... I can't even go back either. Like,
Adrian, your assignment for next week. TV, your assignment for next week is to Google "dancing hamsters Kia Soul" and watch the video.
Oh, all right.
And since we're totally on a squirrel story and we're about to wrap up, that brings to mind the hamster in the microwave from 20 years ago. It's awful. It's terrible. It is hysterical. Look it up.
Are you talking the Joe's? What was that called? Joe's cartoon? Are you talking about like the animated thing?
Yes.
Where he put he'd have animals in blenders and stuff like that.
No. It's an animated thing where you put this cartoon hamster in a microwave and you go through if you put it on one, what happens to the hamster, and then you hit the 2 button and what happens.
What is it, Gus? Yeah. Flash is totally what I was thinking of. I forgot the name of the.
It's the same concept, different animal in a different type of.
Yeah, appliance. I think it's the same creator. It's the same creator. Yeah, Joe cartoon. Yeah, gerbil in a microwave.
This bouncing Kia Soul flying through the air video has received over 18.1 million views by this point.
Mine is saying 34.8 million views.
Wow, there's been a fast 18 in the last minute and a half then.
And the original one says 53.1 million views.
Wow, crazy. Definitely go look at it. That's just squirrel story of the day, hamster story of the day.
Crazy stuff, and fairly happy ending. that nobody got hurt. Amazing, nobody got hurt out of that. But yeah, I thought that was a rare thing. If you go through that thread, there are 4 other videos of the same exact thing happening, and it's typically coming off some kind of jacked up pickup truck or a commercial semi or big commercial truck. Crazy stuff happens way more often than I thought it did. All right. And with that, thanks for joining me, guys. This has been a lot of fun, Katie and Tyler.
Thank you, Adrian.
We are done for this week. Next week, I'm going to be running Paul Security Weekly. We're going to be pre-recording the episode that we air during RSA and doing our regular ESW. So I'll be doing 3 podcasts next week. So come join me on Paul Security Weekly, and we'll be back here for Enterprise Security Weekly next week. Thanks, everybody.